And co-founder of Cloud Microphones, the legendary Mr. Rodger Cloud. Welcome,
Hey
sir.
guys.
I can't
Great to
believe that
see you
we have
guys.
the one and only Rodger Cloud in the house. It's a long time coming, my friend, because we first had our conversation a number of months ago, and it was one of those times where I was like, man, I wish I had hit the record button on this Zoom call. I had no idea what to expect, but you know we're fast friends when it's like 2.5 hours later, we're like, hey, I think I need to go eat dinner or whatever. But it was a great conversation, man, and I'm just honored
and
that
hanging out with you guys in Florida too.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes,
Not
that was
not
a
that long
lot of
ago.
fun.
Oh.
And we might be doing that again, I think, in January if you're heading back that way for the 10th anniversary of
10th
Podfest.
anniversary, wow.
And
Well, it may
and
be a little
also
tricky. That's right around the NAMM show time. So
we might have to have them change the dates.
maneuvering to do here. So.
Yeah. But yeah, shout out to Chris Kermitzos who introduced us. We want to thank Chris for that, and that we really appreciate that. But
Well,
yeah,
he's the
that's
one
true.
that told me about you guys. He said, "You got to meet these guys." So, he
Yeah.
introduced us by email before the Podfest show, and then we got to hang out in Orlando. So
Yes, yeah, that was a lot of fun, definitely.
that was great.
So
I love what you guys are doing. Hats off to you.
Yeah, thank you. We appreciate that's huge coming from you, because I think we're gonna talk about your story, Rodger. You've been in this thing for a minute, and you have and we found that out relatively quickly in that conversation that we had with you, and you've been around a number of legends, and you have a tremendous sort of story as to what Cloud Microphones is all about. But I want to start, if I could, here, and we've got some questions already on Amazon. So Ben, hang on. We're going to get to your question, and that is the Cloudlifter. Okay, everyone, our audience, entrepreneurs, podcasters, business owners, live streamers, maybe just a solo creator, right? They hear about this thing. They hear about this metal box that's blue that's called a Cloudlifter, and they just have like a cursory knowledge of audio. All they know is like, boy, if I get this, it's going to make things better or louder if I have a microphone like a Shure SM7B, but louder isn't necessarily better. It's not exactly what it does, right? But they have a cursory knowledge at this point of audio, and they know generally that this is a thing that they may want. So if I'm a podcaster solo creator, why should I get a Cloudlifter CL1?
Thanks, Chris. Yeah. And just to back that up just a little bit, I want to start with, for content creators out there, a dynamic type microphone. There's 3 common types that are used frequently today. The first is the dynamic microphone, such as the SM7B, or even basic microphones like the SM58, handheld type dynamic microphones that you see at every live venue ever, right?
Right.
These are one of the preferred, types of microphones to use for spoken voice. And if you're podcasting and you're creating, then it's really it's going to be the type of microphone that gives you sort of the most flattering sound, where if you have, like, the other 2 types are condenser microphones and ribbons. Ribbons are also quite gorgeous. I have one of the Cloud ribbons here. We're gonna switch over to that in a moment, just to show you a little bit of a contrast. But to get to the point of what I'm saying here is that the condenser microphones, they're beautiful. There's a lot of them. There's a lot of great uses for them, but you really need a treated environment and you need to have a lot of control over your room, and the sound waves that can reflect can really make a very expensive condenser microphone sound very bad. If you're not in the right situation with it. So, that being said, most of the USB microphones tend to be condenser types, which aren't really the preferred technology, because that's why you hear a lot of podcasts and things. They they sound like they're in a kitchen or a bathroom, or
Yep.
they just don't have a good sound quality to them. So I want to encourage people to research dynamic type microphones. Fortunately, they're the least expensive of the three types, so that's in your favor there. But one thing they do need is a lot more gain, and that's one of the reasons people use condensers, and that's why condensers sort of took over in recording studios and became really popular starting in the 1950s and 60s, because prior to that, the ribbon microphone was the king. You see the old pictures of Elvis Presley and
Oh yeah.
and Frank Sinatra and going back. So the ribbon microphone does need, and the dynamic microphone, they both need more gain than a condenser. So that's where the Cloudlifter comes in. And here we have the Cloudlifter X. You guys have all seen the CL1 that's out there. So it's all about gain staging. And to answer your question is, you want to get the best quality of the sound. You want to get more of the actual microphone itself and less of the sound of your interface. Because when you have to crank your interface up to get the sound of the microphone, it introduces artifacts and starts to significantly deteriorate the quality of the audio. Podcasters are probably saying, well, why do I need this? I've got a USB mic or this or that. People can hear what I'm saying. Well, it's also about, when people put the earpods in and they listen to your podcast, it's a very intimate thing. You've literally got the sound of someone's voice in your head. So you want to give them something that's really comfortable and soothing and enjoyable to listen to if you want them to stick around. Because if it's harsh or it sounds unnatural or you've got some kind of audio issues like that, people might not exactly make the connection as to why, but they'll get audio fatigue and they'll want to turn it off and do something else, because you can only listen to that for so long before it kind of wears on you. So what I've tried to do is educate people, first of all, to buy into the dynamic microphones. And Cloud doesn't even make a dynamic microphone. We make a ribbon microphone. It's a high-end studio beast. But dynamic microphones, you can get a really nice one for $50 on Craigslist, even a brand new one for $100. That's the price of admission just to get a basic like SM58 style microphone that you can talk into. And you'll find that when you plug that into your interface that you do have to turn it up significantly. So when you use the Cloudlifter, we invented a gain stage that literally becomes part of your preamp. It's like modding your preamp in a way, because it gives you, I like to think of it as free gain, because on a technical level, there's no components such as capacitors and resistors in the audio path. And those are the components that significantly deteriorate your sound. So by eliminating that in our patented design, you're able to get way more of the actual microphone, which also translates to way more of your natural voice into the computer through your interface without having to crank your interface and stress your preamps. And that's going to give you a much more soothing sound, something that people can really, sit and listen to for a very long time. Yeah. The point to me is you want to draw people in. You want the sound of your voice to make them come closer as instead of pushing them away. So I think that's very important for content creators. There's so much content being created today. And if you want the edge, if you want to be a standout, don't stand out for the wrong reasons.
Nice. That's, oh man, I love that. And Jim and I preach this all the time, Rodger, and it's just like, I know we're the choir right now because but it's so refreshing to have somebody that, believes as strongly as we do with this. It's like, yes, we're live right now. Those that are listening on an audio podcast a week from now, they're not seeing what's happening, but we have like lots of little pattern interrupts going on and graphics, and Rodger's got a really cool looking studio and all these amazing microphones and things behind us. But if we didn't sound good, or if we had like a little crackle going on, or I had a real noise thing that had like a little weird pitch going on, it doesn't matter if you're watching this thing or not and seeing all of the frosting and the bells and whistles and the clouds and the lightning and all of that stuff. None of that matters because you're being annoyed by the audio. It's not, and people will stick around if right now my camera went dark. They're still hearing a conversation, you know? Maybe
right.
some people would prefer that I go dark right now, but I won't. But it's so refreshing to have someone that understands that even on video, audio is the most important thing. And it's hard to really understand that until you become really annoyed by really bad audio and really noisy audio. And you touched a little bit on USB microphones, Rodger, and I really wanted to roll into that because I think a number of creators, especially solo creators, are gravitating towards USB microphones because there's a couple reasons. Number one, it's super easy, right? Just plug it into your computer and you could, we have USB microphones and we've used them before. But once you have an interface and you have an ability to plug a traditional microphone cable or XLR into an interface, you do hear a difference.
Well, yeah, I mean, do you want to sound like you're on a Skype call, or do you want to sound like you're broadcasting on the radio or on television? That's really the question. And I can almost feel people thinking, well, my podcast has thousands of followers, and I'm just using this little basic setup, or I have a USB microphone, and it sounds okay, and people are still following us, and that may well be true, but you've got those people because they're really into what you're saying. And the people that might be more into what you're saying could get more into what you're saying if there wasn't this barrier between you and the audience. And that's my argument for trying to really step up your audio. Because, if someone's, walking on the moon for the first time, you're going to listen to it no matter how it sounds, because
Right.
it's something really super interesting.
Right.
But if it's a little more casual, and you want people to be drawn in and become part of your broadcast and part of your family in a way, then take some time to think it over. Try to see what you can do. It's not that expensive to get into really great sound these days. The technology's there and it's very affordable.
That's
Yeah.
true. Go ahead, Jim.
No, I was going to say too, and I love that explanation because, like Chris said, we both came from that, and as much as we've heard, you both right now are talking on an SM7B with a Cloudlifter. I'm actually using the MV7X with a Cloudlifter, and so it doesn't matter what microphone you use. If it's an XLR, and I'm now definitely, I'm at the Church of Rodger Cloud when it comes to this. It makes you sound better. And the way you explained it, Rodger, of how when we were at Podfest, of how you're really getting the natural sound of the microphone because you're not having to use as much of the preamps and the software, was like, that's when the light bulb went on for me. I'm like, wow, that's just, it was mind blowing, and love it.
And most dynamic type microphones, this SM7 is what we call a large diaphragm dynamic microphone. It's got a little more body than a small diaphragm. A small diaphragm example would be your venerable SM57, which is essentially what the SM7B is, but with a small diaphragm. It's very, very similar, right? And, but there are any number of dynamic microphones between $89 and $199, and all of them sound great. They all just have a little different flavor. I don't really think of microphones as, I need a better mic. Maybe if you're using a USB, you need a better mic, but all kidding aside, they're really all just different flavors. And, I was on a panel down there at that show, and we were talking about the different microphones and how, people don't know what microphone to get. Like if you're in New York City and you go into B&H, they have a room where you can talk into several different microphones. Or if you go to a Guitar Center, you can get the guys to let you try some of their demos and listen to the sound of a few different microphones. And why I think that's important is because they're all great. It's just which one expresses you. Like if you have a highly sibilant voice, then maybe you want a microphone that tames that a little bit and is a little more mellow in the upper band frequency. Or or if you have a really deep muffly voice, maybe you want one that's a little brighter that pushes those frequencies. So, you know, there's always, it's, to me, it's a joy to try different microphones. We have, several hundred microphones in our recording studio. This is actually our podcast studio, so it's just one room set up like this. But we, just about 90 feet from here, we have a full production, large format style recording studio, and we have microphones going back to the 1930s and 40s and 50s and all the way through today. And each one of them has their own unique voice that expresses something a little different. Every microphone is great on something. You just got to find what that something is. And, when it comes to your voice, you can get for $30, you could probably find a dynamic microphone on Craigslist that'll get you by for a while until you can get something a little nicer.
Yep.
So, that's kind of where I'm coming from, is they're all different flavors of you.
Yeah,
And which one is the
start
one
where
that,
you're at, and find out what, you don't have to jump in and spend $600 and, on all of the stuff and an amazing interface just because so and so has one and told you on a YouTube video that this was the best one or whatever. It's like,
right.
I love the start where you're at, and you guys have this huge, it's a studio, but it's a lab, right? You guys are testing
Right.
out microphones
Research and development lab.
constantly and research and just kind of like looking at sine waves and how it affects different people's voices and all of that stuff. And, that you guys are, like, to say that you're in the weeds is sort of an understatement. So, like,
Yeah.
for you to be able to say that,
We are the weeds.
yeah, we are the weeds. I love that. That needs to be your T-shirt. We are the clouds. We are the weeds. But you did mention something about how, obviously you have ribbon microphones, and you said that you don't make dynamic microphones. Did you ever think and start going down that road of making dynamic microphones?
Yeah, we're looking at some things. Our time may come. It's the challenge
Cool.
with the dynamic microphone is that we have a very strong commitment. You mentioned this earlier before this podcast started. How we manufacture, and this is a great lead into that. One of the reasons we haven't made dynamic microphones to this day is because if we were going to make those in the United States 100%, it's going to be tough to sell $1,000 dynamic microphone. It's just it's going to cost a lot of resources. So we're trying to look into some kind of hybrid things that we might be able to do, because we do have a strong commitment to our manufacturing, being local here in the United States. And with the heart of the Cloudlifter and the circuit boards for all of our products are made, on the Navajo reservation in northern Arizona. So, every single one of these is put together by people who have high tech, good paying jobs in one of the most impoverished communities in the entire country.
That's an amazing story, and I'm glad you segued to that. And I guess I would love to hear a little bit more about it, because we discussed it on our phone call that we had months ago. Was it? Did you guys just see that need in that community of a way for Cloud to give back to them, or to find, like, what sparked your interest in involving yourself in the Native American community there?
Well, it's interesting. There's a lot of different factors that sort of all came together at once to make that happen. I've, I moved to Arizona. You guys are from Georgia. I'm from Georgia too. So I
Okay.
grew up in outside of Rome and
Oh, yeah.
and whatnot. So I moved to Arizona. It was a couple of decades ago, and when I moved here, I got involved with a lot of the Native communities, because there are a lot of Native American people here in the Tucson area as well as the rest of the state. And getting to know some people in those communities and being a part of some of the ceremonies and things that they do here has touched me in a lot of ways and helped me on my personal journey of growth as well. And when we first started Cloud, we were hand building all the circuit boards right here at our facility. I mean, we get an order for 20 Cloudlifters, we were doing a victory lap because that was that was a lot, um, in those early days. And so, but each one of them was hand soldered, and it was really challenging. It was really challenging to do that kind of work, especially as the volume started to come up. And so we started looking for someone that did SMT type of technology boards. And interestingly enough, one of the engineers here came across, they call it Twadinay Industries is the name of the company up on, it's a Navajo owned company in Leupp, Arizona on the reservation. Came across some information about them. And as it turns out, they used to make circuit boards for Apple and GM and Ford. And they had a lot of circuit board manufacturing going on the Navajo reservation up until sometime in the mid 90s. And it really started to taper off for them because everything started moving to China and so forth. So, we found them and reached out, and we were delighted to find out that they still had the capabilities. And that's kind of how it started. And once we made that connection, it was a no-brainer. We just had to go forward with it. And so that happened in 2011, and we're still there to this day.
That's great. And so, and the other question I think about as you're talking about the story of we got an order for 20 and everybody's doing a victory lap. When somebody figured out that using a CL1 with an SM7B was the right way to go to sort of alleviate and become the solution, so to speak, between, maybe the distance between your voice and the diaphragm or whatever, in order to give it the gain that it needed to sound really great. What's that story like? Like when that sort of hit? Because I know it's been it's been a great thing for you. It obviously
has been a great thing. I think the RE20 might have been the first microphone that was not a ribbon that I heard of. Because so interestingly enough, some people don't know this. The first Cloudlifter that we actually made was the CL2. It just wasn't called a CL2. It was just called the Cloudlifter. And my thinking behind that at the time was that, because the Cloudlifter, that's a whole nother story we can delve into if you want. But, when we discovered the Cloudlifter, it was kind of by accident. But my reasoning is that this is so good, everyone's going to want two. So we just made the 2-channel right away. We didn't even think about the 1-channel, right? Because, and so we sold those for about a year, and realized that there was a need for a single channel. And that's when we broke it off into the CL1, CL2. But, it started off. Okay. So a little backstory on the Cloudlifter is, I'm going to switch over. This is our ribbon microphone. Okay. Right now you're still hearing the SM7, but I'm going to pull this forward a little bit. This is one of the Cloud ribbon microphones, and I'm going to turn down the SM7. Bring in. Okay. Can you guys hear me okay?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is the Cloud ribbon. It has the Cloudlifter built inside. So when we designed the Cloudlifter, it was specifically to be the internal component of the ribbon microphone in order to give the ribbon microphone enough output level and strength to be compatible with your modern equipment. Ribbon microphones have, they were the first super high fidelity microphone, full bandwidth type microphone. And it was around 1929 when RCA was put the first commercial ribbon microphones together. By 1931, they had the PB 144, I believe it was called. And that eventually evolved into what they called the 44A, which evolved over time, became the 44B, and then the BX. Eventually, it was retired and replaced with a microphone called the BK11. So, the thing about the ribbon microphone was that it needs a huge amount of gain, even more than the SM7. If you think the SM7 needs gain, well, the ribbon microphone needs even more. So in the 1930s, they had these preamps that the RCA designed called the OP6 that had about 90 decibels of clean gain. and they were just phenomenal. I think we have about 10 or 12 of them next door
Wow.
that are in use and restored in the studio. We use them all the time because
Nice.
they have a sound, we like. But so, you know, I fell in love with the ribbon microphones, with the RCA microphones and some of the other vintage microphones. And so we started restoring them and using them in our studio and selling some and keeping some and just trying to outfit our studio with that gorgeous sound. As you can see, it sounds quite different compared to the dynamic microphone. And if you get close, it has a lot of proximity effect.
Yeah.
Right now, we're using the voice mode. If I flip this switch, now you're in full frequency mode, so it's even bigger.
Wow.
Oh,
And that might be
interesting.
too much for a voice, so that's why we pull the voice mode. But for an instrument or at a greater distance, it's the perfect balance. So um, the R44A is named in homage to the RCA 44A, but the A actually means active in our case, which wasn't the case, of course, with the RCA mics. And ours was the first active mic to come, ribbon mic to come out and have the voice music settings so that you can instantly tame those giant plosives and low end frequencies in order to get a more clear signal in the mid range and the upper band frequencies. So,
Yeah.
and so that's kind of what led to the Cloudlifter. And when we designed the circuit, the first prototypes of the circuit for the active mics, we put it in a little box. This was before Cloud was even announced. We weren't even a company yet. And we put it in a little box to try it with our prototype ribbon microphones that we had been designing. And it was like a light bulb moment where we said, hey, this box is just killer. So I started plugging other mics into it, and I plugged an SM58 into it. And I was like, wow, this is going to change the world. We have to do this. And that's, of course, when we came out with the 2-channel Cloudlifter. And that was when we launched our company in 2009. It was the Javits Center in New York City. We got a 10 by 10 booth, and we just showed up there and put our mics and Cloudlifters on the table, and everything after that's history now. So
That's great.
just
It's almost like a little happy accident
it was a happy accident. But I knew the moment I plugged in that box that this was going to be a thing. And
wow.
we literally within like maybe 3, 4, 6 weeks, something before that initial show, we put that whole product together, got the screen print and the boxes made, and we went forward with it. And man, it was the middle of the recession. It was a bad time for a lot of people financially, and the Cloudlifters, they just took off because that was something that helped people, empowered people, and saved them actual money. Because to get a preamp to operate at the level that a Cloudlifter allows you to operate with your basic interface, you're going to be in for several $1,000s if for something really high quality. And the Cloudlifter gives you that quality, or a similar quality at least, just by having it between your basic interface and your microphone.
Do you have like this was the other thing too, is that a lot of kind of newer interfaces are coming out, and they'll kind of they phrase it somewhat of like it has plenty of gain for the more gain hungry dynamic microphones. They may not say Shure SM. You don't need a Cloudlifter with a Shure SM7B, but we all know what they're saying, right?
Mm-hmm.
But one of the Rodecaster Pro 2, which Jim and I are both using right now. Sure, I can plug in and it's got a SM7B setting, but I'm still cranking up the gain. And this has great, I think, decent preamps in it. But when I put the Cloudlifter, when I put the CL1 in the chain, which is what you're hearing right now, and I dial back the gain to keep my signal between -6 and -12 dB, and it's just, you just get it's hard to explain. It just feels better. It just feels better hearing my voice in my head, and knowing that I'm not stressing the preamps of the mixer or the interface in this is just, for me, it's great peace of mind. But in your estimation, Rodger, like, is there an interface, let's just say, quote unquote, affordable interface out there that plays well, with the Cloudlifter? And you're not allowed to say all of them, but like, are there are there certain, is it a, Focusrite, or the Rodecaster Pro, or Shure MVI or whatever? Is there a particular interface that you found in your research that has great preamps that works well with the Cloudlifter?
Well, I mean, the Cloudlifter is going to help just about any interface to get the most out of it. I'm really liking the new SSL 12. That's what you're hearing right now.
Okay.
The SSL has come out with a very affordable interface, but it has some pretty nice preamps on it. They sound really good. They still need a Cloudlifter, but
right.
But the thing about there's all gain is not created equal. All gain is not equal in quality. Just because you have enough gain doesn't mean that the quality of the gain is there. And what's unique about the Cloudlifter is it becomes a modification to your preamp, allowing you to have a really elegant gain stage before your signal ever has to go through components that could reduce the quality of your signal. Now, on a very technical level, all preamps have capacitors and resistors in the audio path, unless the preamp doesn't have phantom power, which is almost unheard of today. Then there's a need to have capacitors to block the DC voltage, so it doesn't damage your preamp. So the thing that's so unique about the Cloudlifter is it gives you all that gain without having to go through any capacitors or resistors in the actual audio path itself. And so it's like it's like cheating in a way. You're getting free gain, and you didn't have to use these, capacitors in your audio path. So it's like it mods your preamp in a way. It sort of mods your microphone in a way. It puts something between the two, a buffer that gives you significantly more of the actual mic itself. So it's going to sound different, not because it changes the way the microphone sounds, but because it gives you more of the way the actual microphone does sound. It gives you more of the authentic microphone. As you get to the upper gain range of your preamp, as you know, even with the the Procaster there, a Rodecaster, excuse me, that it has enough gain so that you can hear the SM7, but something about the sound, the balance of the sound, is improved when you do use the Cloudlifter, because you're getting a fuller, more complete picture. It's like having more resolution. It's like HD audio or something. It's like, it's like the difference between, an iPhone 3 or an iPhone 4 and an iPhone 14. It's like there's so much more resolution in the photographs. It's kind of similar to the sound. You're getting ultra resolution, full bandwidth, more richness, more character that's authentic to what you're doing, as opposed to a different type of character that gets introduced because you're driving this preamp so hard. So, do people need Cloudlifters to hear their mic? Maybe not, but does it sound more significantly different? Yes. And is that better? Well, I'll let you guys be the judge of that. I don't like to speak in terms of better. I like to speak in terms of different. But it is a very nice choice to have, because it is more of the authentic sound of the microphone itself, and more resolution and depth of your sonic, character.
That's
it's definitely spoiled me, because I know it. I definitely see the difference. And, even doing some of the dialing in on some of the other things, but just by having that gain before, going into the soundboard, I think Chris could tell he's made a big difference for me. And I, I don't know what I'd do without it now, right? That's the other problem you run into.
Right.
Well, it's easy to take it with you.
That's
I'm
true.
going to switch back over to the SM7. I want to. I
Okay.
want to. Well, before I turn the SM7 up, I'm going to just completely remove the Cloudlifter X
Uh-oh.
so that you can hear what this. I mean, I know that you guys are familiar, but for the audience here
This will be
now,
fun for me to edit afterwards, Roger. I appreciate all of the changing that you're doing to your track. I'm kidding. This is awesome.
okay, so I'm going to turn down the cloud ribbon for a second,
Okay.
and then I'm going to turn up the SM7. I'm going to have to turn it up a lot more than I did
Oh yeah.
before, and so that's about where the SM7 was. I don't know how much of that you hear. Maybe if I get really close to it, you get a little bit more, and see how I'm having to, like, basically I'm pegging this out input gain here.
Yep.
I've got it totally pegged, and I'm right on top of the microphone. And if I
Uh-huh.
back up like this or I turn my head, you're losing your sound, right? Now I'm going to enter the Cloudlifter. So now we're with the Cloudlifter, and I'm not on the mic. I can get on the mic, but also if I'm back here, I've got enough headroom. I could be way back here, and you can still hear me, right?
Yep.
This is
Yeah.
coming through fine. So that's one of the benefits. It's not that I can't get sound without the Cloudlifter, but with the Cloudlifter, I've got a lot more flexibility. I don't have to have the mic right in my face. I can, if I turn my head because I'm talking to someone else, or if there's, if I'm at a table with several people talking, or whatever it is, you're not going to get those dropouts, and you've got tons of headroom. And even if I come way back here, you can still hear the mic.
Yeah.
So if you have a microphone such as the SM58, something that's less expensive, you're going to have a similar sort of result. You're going to have more flexibility. And the thing that I like about dynamic microphones like these is that they're hyper focused on what's right in front of them, but you can still get a little more extra headroom by having the Cloudlifter, but it's also still rejecting all the stuff that's going on in the back of the room, and it's not necessarily reaching out to the road to hear the trucks going by or the dog barking next door or whatever it may be. You're able to just have a more natural experience. I mean, the point of the microphones and the technology, even though it seems complicated and you've got an extra thing you got to hook up and you've got to learn all this stuff with your board and all these kind of things, but the whole point of in the end is to make your content and your experience a much more natural, realistic experience. And I feel that the Cloudlifter helps do that because of all the extra gain that you get. And we're actually using the X today, which has a gives you up to 36 dB. But
Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about the effect of the noise and a little bit about noise floor without getting too in the weeds, so to speak? But like, I think generally people think, okay, my microphone needs to be louder, and so they crank up their preamp in their interface, right? And what that does is it introduces more noise from the room around you. Whereas if you use a Cloudlifter and then you were to bring up your gain commensurate with everything else that's going on, how does that affect the noise in your room?
so I'm switching back over to the ribbon now. So yeah, noise is there's a lot of different types of noise, and understanding what kind of noise you're experiencing. One of the things the Cloudlifter does is it helps to get rid of the noise that comes from your preamp. There's like a white noise, a hash sounding like static that comes from your preamp when you get to the upper gain range. It um, it sounds fuzzy. It's in the background. The signal of the microphone is sort of in this cloud of static noise, white noise. What the Cloudlifter does is it gives you more of the actual microphone, but the noise actually stays the same. It's just the signal of the microphone is much greater in relationship to it. So as you turn down the input gain because you've got so much more signal, the noise goes down with it because
I
you don't need
gotcha.
to have your preamp
Yeah.
at that same setting anymore. So that's one type of noise. That's preamp noise. And there's other types of noise like magnetic interference and RF and stuff like that. It comes from, you've got power running through the walls. If you run your XLR cable along a power cable, you'll hear the hum, the 60 cycle hum. There's like radio towers everywhere all around us these days, and different things that can cause noise to infiltrate your signal. And sometimes it's because your microphone cable becomes like a giant antenna without proper grounding. If a lot of these old buildings, especially like you go somewhere like New York City, a lot of old buildings where the grounding may be out of date, and you're gonna find grounding problems that create hum and these types of interference noises. They come through literally more as like a hum. You kind of hear that, and that's usually a grounding issue or some kind of interference issue. And the Cloudlifter can actually help with that, because once again, you're getting more of the actual microphone, and whatever is infiltrating your microphone cables via electrical interference, it's still there, but in relationship to the signal, now you've got much greater amount of signal, and that is reduced to a point where it's not really audible or distracting. And so the Cloudlifters help with that as well. What the Cloudlifters can't do is help with the noise that's happening in your room right outside of your window or on the other side of
Right.
your door, your air conditioner. Actually, that's not entirely true. The Cloudlifters, there is I should go over the Cloudlifter Z and do another little
Oh, great. Yeah,
demonstration.
that was definitely on my list to talk to you
Um,
about.
But to wrap up that part of it, though, it's
Mm-hmm.
the noise that's going on in the background of where you're recording, that's going to increase with the gain. I mean, it's just acoustic, organic acoustic noises that are happening in your room. So the way to control that is, like we were talking about earlier, get a nice dynamic microphone that's more focused, that rejects a lot of that stuff, something that's hyper focused, that just picks up just you. And I think that's one of the reasons the SM7B has become so popular, because it's excellent at just focusing on what's in front of it and
Yeah.
nothing else.
Yeah, and it's we always when people ask us what kind of mic do you get, we ask them what kind of room they're in. We need to make you need to make sure that you don't have fans and air conditioning and all of that stuff. And I guess is it safe to say that like the Cloudlifter can turn a dynamic microphone essentially into a condenser?
Yeah, I would I would say that it does help it to perform like a condenser.
Right.
Um, but you still retain the natural characteristics of the dynamic microphone.
Mm.
And what's nice about that is that the character and the way that the dynamic microphone rejects the room is still there. It still does that. But the amount of like signal that you get is definitely more consistent with what you would expect out of a really nice condenser mic. So I've hooked the SM7 back up, and now this time we have it with the Cloudlifter Z, as you can see
Nice.
here.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you can hear this. This is our full frequency mode. I'm gonna be really quiet and turn up the gain. It's pretty low in the background, but we do have an air conditioner on in here. I mean, it is Arizona, so about 109 outside right now.
Jeez.
But I'm going to be really quiet as a mouse here, and I'm going to turn up the gain. I don't know if you can hear the air conditioner. And the reason I'm doing this is because the Cloudlifter Z has a variable high pass, which you can use to filter out some of that type of low frequency background noise. And here we go. So I'm really cranked at this point.
Now
You hear it a little bit.
Yep, you can hear the air
So
conditioning.
as I turn the Z knob, you're going to hear it disappear.
Oh yeah.
So we've just filtered out the low frequency acoustic noise that's in the room with the Cloudlifter Z by engaging the high pass filter here and then using the impedance knob, which is basically a variable high pass, to shave away that low frequency material until it's gone and just focusing on the voice, and all that low frequency rubbish that you don't really want, it's gone. It's also great for
Wow.
plosives. If you'll notice, like a lot of people have trouble with sounds that words that begin with P, and you hear that sound.
Oh yeah.
Well, check this out. So I've got the Cloudlifter Z here. I'm going to go back. I'm in full frequency mode now. So you'll hear kind of the plosive. It sounds like a kick drum, right? I don't know how well that's translating because I'm not listening with my phones, but like that. And if I shave that away, and then it's gone, right? So
Right.
you can
You're dialing out that low end that could be pushing that clip sound, that extra air that's pushing against the diaphragm.
Exactly. And that clip sound, that literally just destroys your headroom. It just eats away at your headroom. So headroom is, for those that might not know, is the amount of rise to your signal that you can get before you reach a distorted level in your chain. If you're recording, what not having enough headroom sounds like, because it just totally distorts. It's that nasty sort of digital clip sound. You don't want that in your audio. So by having plenty of headroom, you're able to get a really loud enough signal, clear enough signal, but without going over that threshold, which causes that digital clip to happen, which doesn't sound very good. So by using the Cloudlifter Z with the high pass filter up front, and by the way, if you have a high pass filter on your device, you can use that too. The Cloudlifter Z didn't invent the high pass. It's a cool feature. It's nice to have, but there are other ways to do that. But most people end up doing it in post because that's what they have in a form of a plugin. And the reason it's better on the front end, and the reason we included it with the Cloudlifter Z, is because by getting rid of that low frequency material that will drive you to go over that clip of headroom, you're able to get more headroom on the way in, because that signal never hits your interface. Once it's there, you can't really get rid of the clip.
Yep.
You might be able to get rid of the plosive, the pop of the P, as long as it didn't go over that threshold, but you're never going to truly get rid of that digital clip. I mean, there are some tools if you want to spend, an hour trying to get rid of one little sound and that kind of thing. It can be done, but it's a lot of work. It's better if you can if it's never there in the first place, then you've got all this headroom, and it once again, it's about empowering people to make it easier and more natural to capture without having all these things that can distract us.
Yeah, anytime you can avoid doing any of that stuff in post and using Isotope RX9 or whatever it is that's going to, they have a plugin, it's called Plosive Remover, and it tries to do the same thing, but you're just, at that point, you're already like the house is painted, right? You have something done already. There's already a distorted version of that. I love the idea of being able to say, hey, when I record, this will never go there. This is, not necessarily limiting, not a limiter, but it's like, hey, listen, there's a frequency range here that does not need to be on your voice ever. And that's like the first thing I do in EQ for voice. is like there's just a, just get that low, like only a dog can hear kind of stuff out, because all that does is it's just is in the way, right? And so
Right.
I love the fact that you
I mean,
can
it's
just,
never useful in a mix either if you're producing music.
yeah,
It's just
right.
not vocal,
And
Um,
it's not like you can feel it really either. But I mean, you said like, people can do it with plugins, and the whole preemptive thing makes sense too. But I like to just have like a dial like that. Just having a dial just for some reason just feels like, I don't know, it just feels good to me to be able to dial. Maybe it's the bass player in me, dialing in that right amount of distortion, so it just sounds like Geezer Butler or whatever. But we do have a question, Rodger, from
oh, great.
our friend Phil Hill on Amazon. He wants to know how to get trained on the setup and the tuning after he buys a Cloudlifter and a mic. And I do have an overhead shot here to give everyone sort of an example of input and output here. But Rodger, I'll roll this over to you in terms of, I mean, this thing in terms of what you need to do is very simple, right? You just need an extra mic cable. I think that's one thing you definitely will do. It sits in your chain, right? So you got your mic, whatever dynamic mic you've got. You're going into the Cloudlifter, and you're coming out with your mic cable, and you're going into your interface. And then from there, I think maybe that's where Phil kind of feels. I'm assuming you've got spots on cloudmicrophones.com that kind of walk you through this stuff?
That's right. That's right. So we do have some videos on our website, and Phil, and thank you so much for your question, Phil, by the way. Cloud is also always here to help with any kind of one-on-one questions. You just have to call into the number and, dial in the prompt for support, and we're always happy to help. But we do have videos. You can also email us at support@cloudmicrophones, and we can shoot back those videos with a direct link. We have a Cloudlifter user's guide video. It's really quite simple. Now, Chris is right. You do need an extra cable with the Cloudlifters. And I think that is actually, a feature. If I may explain that,
Yeah.
there are a few type of knockoff brands and stuff out there that have come out. Some of them will actually plug directly into the back of the microphone and hang off of the microphone. But in my opinion, I don't want that, because that can start to stress your connectors and cause shorts over time with your microphone, and it's also this clunky thing that just kind of hangs off your microphone. By using an extra cable, you're able to make it clean and protect your microphone, and be able to utilize the technology without sacrificing something else, which in that case would be the integrity of the XLR port on the microphone itself. And it's really just as simple as putting the Cloudlifter between your mic and your interface, and using the 48 volts phantom power feature on your interface to engage the Cloudlifter. The Cloudlifter will not pass any signal if you don't use the 48 volts phantom power, because it needs phantom power to operate. Now, once again, it doesn't pass phantom to the microphone. So that's really helpful in the case of ribbon type microphones. A lot of the ribbon microphones can actually be damaged by using phantom power if you apply phantom power to them, and it's a passive type of microphone. Certain other types of microphones and like power supplies can also get damaged. So by utilizing the phantom power in the Cloudlifter but not passing it through to the microphone, and it's actually a feature that protects the microphone from potential damage.
Good stuff. And what's up, Mr. Mod is in the house and Amazon. We appreciate the comments. Mr. Mod, if you don't have a Cloudlifter by now, we need to get you and Christina Nietzsche on the Cloudlifter train, because, this is where it's at. And also, I would be remiss, Rodger. We've talked like we could go on for a long time, but we didn't really go in depth too much on the Cloudlifter X. And I do have this as well. You did mention, it's got additional gain, so and there's a toggle switch on it. But I was very interested when you were talking to us about this originally, and that this is a transformer based mic activator. And I think generally, again, our audience may not know, like, transformer more than meets the eye, Decepticon, like that's what they think a transformer is, right? But I'd love to get your take on, sort of what the Cloudlifter X is. And if you're a content creator, if you're a solo creator, if the X is for you and maybe some others who are using it and are benefiting from it.
Yes. So basically, the standard Cloudlifters, which are tried and true, which everyone uses already with their a lot of people use already with their podcasts, they give you more of the actual microphone itself. There's no change or alteration to the character or any kind of colorization or anything that occurs. It's just a very natural, clean, super clean, more of the actual mic represented by the gain stage in the Cloudlifter. The Cloudlifter X was a departure from that in a way, but not really. So to explain that, you still actually do have the ultra clean gain of the standard Cloudlifter, but what we've done here is we've added an input transformer, and what that means is it's literally wires that are wrapped around a metal core that produce a magnetic energy that increase. They actually give you some gain in this case. Transformers have been used for, well, at least since the 1920s, probably before that. And basically, all of your electrical grid, if you look out your window and see your power lines coming into your building, there's usually a big box of some sort hanging off of that. That's probably a transformer, because you've got thousands of volts of electricity going through your wiring, but you only need 120 at your house. So it bleeds that off and it transforms that into something that you can use. So there's different types of transformers. In the audio world, transformers have been mostly used on large format type recording consoles and broadcast consoles. So when you see the big mixing board at the at NBC or at a major studio, most of those have transformers on all the inputs. And what the transformers do is there's a purpose for them. A lot of times it's to increase the gain. And in the case of the Cloudlifter X, we're using 1 to 2.5. So you put one signal in and 2.5 times comes out, and then that feeds the Cloudlifter core. So in the total, you get 36 dB. With the standard Cloudlifter being around 25 dB, that extra bit of gain, the extra 10 dB or so, is a result of the transformer transforming that audio signal as it runs around this core into something that's even more powerful. Okay. Now I know that's pretty technical, but what happens is, and one of the reasons if you watch documentaries like Sound City, where the Foo Fighters, they purchased this gorgeous Neve console from Sound City and they brought it back to their studio and installed it. Well, that's a console that's full of transformers, and the reason that people like those transformers is because they actually have a sound. The sound produces a type of character that's really desirable for a lot of people. Same thing as a bass player, you know this, guitar players, they're always looking for the tube amps.
Yep.
And one of the things that about tube amps for guitarists is, sure, the tubes do have a sound, and that's a big part of it. But what people a lot of times don't even realize is that more than half of the sound that they're getting, more than half of the reason they like that amp is because of the transformers themselves before it even gets to the tubes.
Wow.
It goes through these transformers. And these transformers have a way of just taking the audio and, they make it sound like it's just bursting with frequency and sound. It's just so rich, and it's like your cup is overflowing, it's like full of character and vibe. And, that's why people like transformers a lot of times in our industry, for the pro audio folks that are actually producing music and they're going out and buying preamps. Well, it's always about the transformers that are used and this and that. And that's why people love the big, large format consoles. They say, oh, I want to get that Neve sound.
Yep.
Well, what was that Neve sound? More than half of it was the transformers. It was like, that's such a big part of the whole thing. And you can use transformers a lot of different ways. For example, for a DI, if you're taking an instrument into your preamp, instrument has what we call a very high impedance. And you have to step that down to something low because microphones have a very low impedance. And what impedance is that's a whole nother thing. That's why we made the Cloudlifter Z, is to not to get technical and mathy about the whole thing, but to just be able to turn the knob until it sounds right by using impedance to your advantage. And, I guess what I'm, really getting to here is that the Cloudlifter X, what we've done with this is we custom designed a transformer with Dave Guerin over at Cinemag. It's wound right over here in Canoga Park, California, just about 500 miles away here. And it had to be good enough for a cloud. It had to be like, it had to really knock our socks off. And what we've done with this is we've created a very large bandwidth transformer. So you're getting like below 20 hertz up to almost 100K, which I know we can only hear to 20, but the harmonic resonances that are produced at different bandwidths actually do affect the total sound. And sometimes it's more about the way the sound feels. Like, you can't necessarily measure it on a scope. You don't necessarily see a difference in the frequency response itself, but you can hear that it sounds different. And it's more about the character. So what we wanted to do was design a transformer that wasn't particularly colored, that didn't have a lot of like colorization. And by colorization, I mean fundamentally changing the frequency response of your microphone. I didn't want it to get real mid-rangey and honky or something like this. Like, sometimes that's desirable, but not for Cloudlifter. I wanted it to be full, massive bandwidth, and one of the things that inspired the transformer that we're using here is listening to Rupert Neve, who designed, of course, the Neve consoles and had passed away a couple years ago, but listening to him talk about his transformers and why he had these very wide bandwidth transformers that went out to 100K and what that does for the sound, and knowing that, many of our favorite records were recorded on his consoles. And we have a Neve console ourselves here at our studio as well. I wanted to produce something that was accessible, that kind of gave you a little slice of that philosophy in a Cloudlifter. So you can get sort of a large broadcast format, large format style console character, but without sacrificing something by the way of color. I know that color and character can be real similar, but what we're looking for here is we're looking for the way that the audio just is bursting with frequency, as opposed to something that fundamentally changes the way it sounds. I wanted more of what it sounds like. So what the Cloudlifter X gives you is the authentic sound of what your microphone, in this case the SM7, we're going through the Cloudlifter X, what your microphone sounds like coupled to that transformer, and then going into the Cloudlifter gain stage, which is ultra clean and pure, so that the end result that you get is this beautiful sound that's totally clear, super clean, but does have some of that broadcast quality, vibe to it. Some of that, if you're recording guitar, you might use the Cloudlifter X to get it, to get more of that sound. And one of the features that I really love about the Cloudlifter X is just this little button. You can see it here on your screen. And what this button does is it reduces the overall gain that you're putting out on the output, but not on the input, because the transformer is dynamically responsive to what you put into it. The harder you hit that transformer with signal, the more it starts to give you a little bit of that harmonic content, that vibe, that character, the overtones that start to come out. If you slam, you can use this button to reduce the gain to 12 dB, and then you can put a snare drum through it, and it just fattens it up, and it gives you kind of that more round sound. This is really helpful, a game changer for you guys recording at home with your basic interfaces. Like I'm using the SSL12, the Focusrites, any of that stuff. Well, there's no transformers in most of that stuff, because transformers are expensive and they're labor intensive to make and manufacture. So by using something like the Cloudlifter X, you're able to get more of that character that you would expect if you walked into a multi-million-dollar studio to record. And that's kind of what we were looking for, is to make that accessible for you guys.
That's awesome.
Great stuff. Yeah, and I think, you had mentioned to me as well, and maybe you've tested some of this there. I'm not going to say maybe. I know you tested stuff. You let us know that sometimes in particular situations, maybe the harder you hit it, right? Maybe you get some other sort of nuances that
right. That's right.
can get the harder you hit that.
That's right.
That transformer.
And so what we did with this button here to reduce the gain is we're reducing the level of the output coming out of the Cloudlifter, not padding the input. That's a very important distinction. It's not a pad. A pad would reduce the amount of signal before it hits the device, where the output reduces the output so that it doesn't overload your preamp if you want to record hotter material through the Cloudlifter, to take advantage of that overtone and that harmonic content that you can get by kind of slamming it. So we use these with the button in. We put a fairly hot dynamic microphone on our guitar amps or on a vocal or on a snare drum, kick drums, toms, any of that stuff. Do you need a Cloudlifter to record drums? I mean, drums are pretty loud. You can get drums into your computer without a Cloudlifter, no question. But we like the way it sounds, so we use that button to reduce the output level so that we can hammer the input and really take advantage of just pushing that audio through that transformer so that it gets that vibe, and that sound of that harmonic content that happens. It's really a beautiful thing.
Great stuff. Jim, you got anything? I mean, I'm sorry, I'm hogging Rodger here.
No, this has been amazing. I mean, I'm just a sponge soaking this stuff up, because you guys are definitely the audiophiles. Is that the right term to use, Chris?
I don't know. That feels like a bad word to me.
Yeah.
Nerd.
I just like stuff that sounds good. That's
there you go.
I started this company because I wanted music to sound better.
There you go.
It seemed like it was going in the wrong direction around in the mid 2000s. I felt like the tonality of music, not the creativity, not the artistry. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about the production quality. Mm-hmm. It's the history of recording and how it's progressed. Sometimes it's you take a step forward, but it's 2 steps back, and there's this harshness, this lack of realism, and that's why I wanted to revive the ribbon microphones. And we think it's time for people to rethink the ribbon, because the ribbon microphone for many years was the best you could do. And then the tube mics of the 1950s and 60s came out, and they made things much easier to deal with on tape, because the ribbon microphones naturally have a bit of a softer sound, they're a little more mellow, where the condenser mics and the tube mics were much more aggressive and they cut through. And that was a beautiful thing if you were recording to tape, because by the time you bounced down several generations, you still needed to have the brilliance there to be able to clearly hear what was going on. But now that we're in a digital age, that's, all the more reason to turn back to ribbon microphones. I feel that the ribbon microphones, even though they come from the past, they really are the future. I'm going to switch Milk back over to the Cloud here. You should have the Cloud now. And, they do naturally
you can hear the difference. I mean, you definitely can.
Oh,
It's very rich. And I remember too, it was funny because I think all these people have it on their wish list, but you guys had the ribbon mics for people to try out at Podfest, and people would like have the headphones on and they would speak and they'd be like, oh my gosh. It was just like, you should add, I don't know if you maybe did like the reaction video of like, wow, that's like that they've never heard their voice sound so good. And I know Julie Riley from StreamYard is like, I've got this on my list. I'm saving up for that microphone.
Nice. Yeah, well, ribbon microphones have, in our case, we have it's about 2 inches long, and it's this little narrow strip of aluminum. It's very fragile. We hand make all the ribbons here. It's myself and Kevin, our lead engineer over here at the R&D facility at Cloud. We're the only ones that do the ribbons here. We make all the ribbons by hand. We're using the corrugation tool that we're using is an exact replica of Harry Olson's personal prototyping tool from the 1930s. And the person that I designed this with, Stephen Sank, he inherited those toolings, the cutters and the corrugators, and he allowed us to replicate them for our production. And it's still made. The ribbon itself is still exactly like it was in the 1930s, but everything else we've brought into the modern age. This is a modern microphone. It's got robust character to it. It can be used for a lot of different sources. There's a lot of myths. I want to do a whole episode sometime just on myth busting here, because
there you go.
ribbon microphones are full of myths that are just totally, well, the thing about myths is there's a little grain of truth in them, but then there's so much myth that gets built up around it. Yes, ribbon microphones are more fragile, but you're not going to destroy them by normal use. I could go on and on. I'm not going to get too far into that right now. That's a whole nother episode, I think. But we want to help people to encourage, to learn about what the modern ribbon is. The Cloud ribbon is very much a modern representation. We kept the heart of it the same, but we wanted to bring everything forward into our modern era. And every single day as we were developing these microphones, the primary thought was, what would Harry Olson himself do if he were redesigning this for the modern era? And it's like that. What would Harry do? That was our mantra every day. What would Harry do? Well, I don't think he'd do that. So let's try this, and that's how we sort of arrived at it. And it was the passion for the way these things sound and, what you can do with them in music. We literally thought like it's a kind of a grandiose thought, but we thought that this would help to save music in the end and help to provide a way to use the past to move forward into the future. Because it just, that I was just so full of I was totally convinced in the mid 2000s that music production was going in the wrong direction because of the microphone. Because people didn't know what ribbons were. It's the last microphone that people generally buy, because by the time they come across a ribbon, they have several condensers and some dynamics and whatever the sales guy that they called up online to talk to, they'd never tell them to get a ribbon. This is the last thing on their mind.
Do you
Ribbons
think
are
it's
for those weird
is it
guys.
a cost issue, or is it like is there a preconceived notion that it's for the recordings that were back in the day? Do you feel like it's going to take somebody that's more modern that comes out and says, I'm using this and I use this ribbon microphone on these recordings? Or
Sure. I mean, we have, I've made ribbons for a lot of people. Stevie Wonder's a friend of mine. I made mics for him, several mics for him, and Donald Fagen, Steely Dan, and Nick Mason from Pink Floyd uses them for his drum overheads in the studio. And the Lucius Girls, that they actually toured with the Cloud, and they used it live, and because of the figure 8 pattern, you can use it for both sides.
right, okay,
Was really nice. And so there are quite a few. Seth Anthony, a current artist, I just saw his video, and he's using the Cloud mic in his music video because he loves to record with it. And so there's just a lot of myth busting that needs to happen.
yeah,
People think that the ribbons are for those weird guys
yeah,
that do that weird stuff. They don't know. They think that ribbon microphones are too dark. Does this
mm,
microphone sound dark to you?
no,
Oh,
no,
Um, it's not a dark microphone. A good ribbon microphone is not dark.
yeah,
Um, you know, some ribbon microphones are darker than others, that's for sure. But we designed the Cloud to be completely open, full of life. We didn't hype the top end, but we wanted to create it in a natural way. And that ribbon, it's literally the simplest technology in the world. I mean, it's a ribbon, it's a aluminum ribbon, which is a thin strip of aluminum that's very lightweight in a magnetic field with a wire on top and a wire on bottom. There's your alternating current, and it produces a slight amount of current just from the sound waves that interact and vibrate on the ribbon. It's very much like our ears work. Other microphones, you look at condenser microphones, and they have, this like round capsule. It's really tight. You get this round, it's material that's like really tight capsule that produces resonant frequencies that alter the sound. Now, we like those alterations sometimes for certain things, but it's not particularly a natural sound. It's very much more of a colored sound. Where
mm,
ribbon microphones, when done right, in my opinion, they they have a very natural character. They sound like it sounds, and that's it. It's just what you hear is what you get. And when I'm placing the microphone, I literally put my ear to the source, and I find the spot where I like the way it sounds, and that's where I put the mic. And it always sounds exactly like I heard it.
huh.
And
Well,
other
that's
mics,
what, yeah. I was going to say that's what would Harry would do, right?
that's what Harry would.
WWHD. What would
That's
Harry
right.
do?
What would Harry do?
Yeah, but
Um,
plus they look cool. I mean, they really do look cool. I mean, I think there's a lot there's a lot of microphone companies that make something that looks retro, and it can kind of look like the mic that Elvis used, or the one that drops into the ring when they announce fighters, or but that has a classic, vintage, really cool look to it as well. I know that's I know sound is most important. It could look right now like a chicken for all you care. If it sounds great, but I'm just saying it looks cool too.
well, that's interesting that you say that because, I mean, I do think they look cool as well, but they don't look like this just because they look cool. Uh, it's a good.
Function.
It's actually, there is a function to this shape and the way it sounds. And if you look here at this screen, the way the angles are on the front and the back, that is actually acting as a quadratic diffusion mechanism. It's like you see the stuff behind me on the walls. It's
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
like breaking up apart the sound waves here. Well, it's the same thing with the microphone. One of the reasons the cloud microphone doesn't sound particularly dark is because of the screen. The way the screen is shaped, there's some science behind it because it breaks apart the pressure of the low frequency material. We were talking earlier about plosives and how that can overwhelm your mic, and you get so much of that. It's almost like sounds like a kick drum when somebody says the word Paul or something, right? Well, this shape reduces that low frequency material by breaking apart that sound wave. And there's no parallel surfaces inside the microphone for the sound waves to bounce around. So it's very much like the studio here. We've got a combination of absorption you can see here, and then this is more of a diffusion where it breaks apart the sound wave. In our mixing room next door, we have even more complex types of diffusion materials because we're mixing in there, and we need the room to be true to what's coming out of the speakers, so it doesn't affect the way the sound is heard and perceived. Because sometimes in a poor room, you'll hear more bass than is actually there. You'll perceive the bass when you're listening, and then you'll start turning down the bass, but then you go listen to it somewhere else and there's no bass because your room was part of your equalizer, right? Your
Yep.
room affects the frequency response that you hear. It's just like taking a giant equalizer and boosting certain frequencies and reducing others, and that's kind of what rooms can do to your sound. And that's why we try to treat them and we try to measure them a little bit and use a combination of absorption and diffusion and flat surfaces, because flat surfaces are also natural. We use hardwood floors. I love the way they sound. They actually
Really?
resonate with the sound waves and create more room sound in a way, because it's just like a nice guitar. The floor becomes part of the instrument,
Yeah.
and it becomes part of the room. But we're used to hearing when we're standing around talking with people or whatnot, we're used to hearing the sound bounce off the floor. So if you carpet everything and make everything dead, you kind of can lose some of that, and it doesn't sound quite as good because it's not natural
Mm.
anymore, and you start to muffle certain frequencies. So there's a little bit of a trick to it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not something you can explain in a quick moment, but
Right.
if you're going to treat your room, look into it a little bit and try to find that right combination that will give you, particularly if you're mixing music, uh, or doing music production, it's even more important because you want to make sure that what you're listening to through your speakers is going to sound representative of what you're going to hear when you go listen somewhere else.
Right. And I think a
So,
lot of content creators too forget, like, you can treat everything around you, but you're still going to have computer screens in front of you, which is made of glass, right? And so
right.
it's like, and that's probably the closest thing to your microphone is this glass that could be, your voice could be bouncing off of too. So there's always probably going to be a little bit. You can't have a completely dead thing. But to your point, why would you want to? You have to have a
Well, that's
little of
not
it.
what things sound like when we go hear
Right.
them in the real world. And if we're trying to
Mm-hmm.
produce something that's authentic and has a naturalness to it, then you might, consider that as part of your overall strategy. Um, and I like to sometimes I actually use the flat surfaces to get a certain sound. Um, the nice thing about the Cloud ribbon mic is the figure eight pattern, where it picks up front and back. I'm just talking into one side of it now, but this
Mm.
isn't distracting you at all. You're not
Right.
hearing anything over here to distract. And that's because, I've got it's angled right at, there's some other diffusion over here. You can't see it on camera, but there's more diffusion over here, similar to what's behind me. Um, and I'm using the figure eight pattern to capture the sound, because one of the things that, one of the we're talking about myths, you were asking why people don't use ribbons, is they think that they always need a directional microphone. And um, what's interesting about ribbon microphones is they can actually be more directional sometimes than cardioid microphones like the SM7, because the pickup pattern is so tight. It's front and back, but you've got a deep side null rejection here because the ribbon picks up on both sides. Anything that's common to both sides gets canceled because the back side of the ribbon is an inverse of phase. It's like the negative of a photograph,
Huh.
right? It's the inverse of the audio. And
Okay.
so, um, if I talk into the side of the microphone, you're not
Oh
going
my
to hear it.
God. That's it.
You're
I
not,
mean, you could barely hear it when you move
you
there,
can
when you
barely
just
hear it.
move
And
up
the main
front.
reason that you can hear it is because it's bouncing off the screen and coming back. If I didn't have that
Wow.
screen
Wow.
there, you'd probably hear even less. And so what's really neat about the ribbon type technology is you're getting that side null rejection, but you're also getting it across the top of the microphone. It's also nulling here and the floor.
Oh.
So This microphone literally rejects the floor, the ceiling, the sides, and just focuses really tight front and back. So as long as you control what's on the other side of the microphone, you can get a much more directional pattern in a way than you can with cardioid mics. Now, the interesting thing about cardioid mics is they pick up the whole side of the room. They have much more of a wider. If you look at the patterns on your like technical data sheets and so forth, you'll see that the cardioid patterns are kind of like a heart. They kind of like come out like a heart here, and it's
Right.
because they're getting a little bit of the backside. So in a way, the figure eight pattern is a much more tighter, hyper directional. Even though there's two sides to it, it's much more hyper directional than even your basic cardioid mics.
Would two people doing a podcast with a ribbon microphone, so people speaking on either side?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
We've done that. We were at our local radio station, KXCI uses the clouds in their they have a Hotel Congress studio, and they have another studio. They use them a lot to capture bands when they come in. They'll use a one mic situation with a guitar and singer or something. But we were actually, when we filmed with them and did an interview, we used both sides of the mic. Sometimes we'll just put it right between us, just have a conversation. It does great, because what's happening on this side is even though they're inverted in phase, if the sound's coming from this side, it won't be inverted. It's just inverted on this side. It's a lot, there's a lot of math to it, but in terms of the phasing and how that works. But you can actually take like an omnidirectional microphone, which picks up all around, and place it right next to the ribbon, and it'll totally cancel one side of the mic when you blend them together. Because the sum of both of those microphones together it's like the negative image of a photograph. Yeah. If you put those together, it disappears. Quite literally.
That's just like some like ghost
we just got
stuff.
Got like a PhD class in sound, and I'm afraid I'm going to fail the test. I have to go back and listen to all the notes. But one last thing, Rodger, we wanted to ask about, people may not realize, is you actually practice this craft in a sense. You have a band. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your band?
Oh, sure. An artist, Liz Painter, she's from New Mexico. She's come down here for an extended period, and we've been doing some recording. And so we play together in a band called Cloud Painter. We had a show Friday, local venue here, Monterey Court. We played at Governor's Island in New York City a couple of weeks ago, and we have another show this weekend. So, and then we get a little break, and we go into the studio, we try all these different ideas with the microphones. So it gives us a chance to use the stuff in practice. We're having a great time doing it now. Our single came out a few months ago, and then we have some more material coming out soon. It's called Cloud Painter. You can find us at cloudpaintermusic.com and on Instagram and Facebook as well. And we're having a great time.
And for those of you who are watching on Amazon, it's down. Love Come Down is the single from Cloud Painter, and it's featured right now on Amazon. You can listen to it on Amazon Music, and I'm sure on all of the places: Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, all of the places. But I love, Rodger, this whole conversation. But to this, and just to put a button on our conversation as well, it's like you're a musician, right? You're a content creator. You're not just somebody who's putting together boxes and transistors. You're actually like doing it. You carry the bag.
That's right.
You know what podcasters need, what their struggles are, what their pain points are, what musicians need. You're constantly talking to people like Bootsy Collins and all of these people who are a part of the Cloud family, and so it's just a tremendous honor to have someone who is really just a legend, in my opinion and many people's opinion, in the audio industry. And we just really appreciate you taking the time and just sharing your your wisdom. And to Jim's point, I think I'm going to have to listen to this 5-6 times to really fully get this master class of impedance and all,
Yeah,
right direction and all of that good stuff. But
little bits at a, little bits. It comes little bits at a time. Happy to have more conversations. I think that just getting in there and practicing it. Real quick, when we were in New York, we recorded Christine Cruda and her band. Her Little Cruda is her orchestra. She's an arranger and the cellist for the Eagles. Her one of the other people in her band, the violin players, is the bandmaster for the Eagles. So they have their own group as well, and they were recording at the songwriting. We were at Antisocial Club songwriting camp, and we came and we were one of the sponsors. We did some of the sessions at some of the studios in New York City. We were in Brooklyn for this particular session at Red Convertible Recording with Ricky Beretti. And anyway, it was really wild. We had a great time. We used 7 Cloud ribbon microphones to record the orchestra. But the centerpiece of it all was using the Cloud in a mid-side configuration. And it was basically one mic like this and one like this. And you point directly the side null at the center of the source, and you use this for the center. And it's a really cool recording technique that utilizes all these things that we just talked about with phasing and the inverse of the audio in the backside. Because what you do is you take the side microphone here and you make 2 tracks out of this, and this one microphone becomes your stereo image, your left and right, and the center becomes right in the middle. And then you take in post or on the way in, you take that negative side of the microphone and you flip it so you have 2 positives. Now, if you sum that together in the center, the sound will completely vanish. But if you blend it with something coming from the center here, it creates this organically through the phase relationship, creates a spatial stereo image that is just phenomenal, which will literally put the violas over to the right and the cellos over to the left and give you this stereo image in a way that you can't really get in any other way. And it's much like the way our ears hear. Again, it comes back to how do we naturally hear music and hear things when we're standing in front of it. And this mid-side tech is very natural because our ears are the same way. There's 2 sides and we're kind of inverted in phase over here. And it's kind of like reproducing a human head, and
wow.
So we tried that with Christine and her beautiful orchestra, and they were just blown away. They said that they ended up using the room mic, the mid-side configuration, as like more than 50% of the sound of the whole orchestra. Even though we had close mics of Clouds over, they used a tiny bit of that in the mix, but mostly it was this mid-side room configuration. Because what happens is when you have the center mic here, the sound wave comes. If it's coming from the right side, then it literally will phase cancel on the left side because we flip the phase, and it'll push that image so that you literally hear what's going on this side on the right, this side on the left. So it's my favorite way to record. We use it all the time. I use it as my go-to drum overheads. I use it sometimes for even just percussion, even just a shaker. Just recording a shaker, I'll use the configuration because it makes it sound like you're in the room with it. You can hear it, just the depth and the character that it brings is phenomenal. And that was really commonly used in the 1950s and 60s when stereo recordings first came out. And it's one of those things that has just sort of gotten lost along the way as we've entered this modern era. And so I want to bring the ribbon microphone back. I want people to just consider that it's time to rethink the ribbon, because it's really one of the most powerful things that you can use in music production to bring a realism and a depth to your recordings. So,
great stuff, man. I mean, I have to see. Hopefully, did you film that? when you guys
Yes,
were doing that? I'd love to
we
see
did.
that.
So we've got a newsletter coming out. If you haven't
Awesome.
already, everyone, if you go to cloudmicrophones.com, sign up for our newsletter. If you do it today, you might get to see this newsletter come out. I think it's coming out this week. And there is some video clips there and some audio clips of what we did in New York City with this mid-side configuration.
Killer.
So that's a cool way to hear it. But regardless, I'll send you a clip, not to be shared, just for your own ears. You can check out.
Awesome, man.
Awesome.
I can't wait. Roger, this has been, and I knew it would be awesome, but I didn't know it would be this awesome. So, man, thank you so much.
I knew it'd be this awesome with you guys, man. I love hanging out with you guys. I could do this all day, all night.
Let's do it. Let's just roll. Let's just go 6, 8 hours.
When I roll back into Atlanta sometime, we're gonna have to hang out. So.
Oh yeah,
that sounds
absolutely. Awesome. And are you going to Podcast Movement at the when is that? September?
August, we're figuring out all of that out. We're not going to have a booth. We are sponsoring one of something for the bags, something in the bag or something. I think we're going to have a giveaway contest or something.
Cool.
Are you going to be there?
Yes, we'll be there. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah. Well, maybe so. We were thinking about maybe popping up there and just hanging out and without having a booth. It's,
not too far from you.
What's that?
Not too far from you.
Not bad. No, not bad at all. I'll probably still fly, but it's a short hop to Denver. I've had this idea. Wouldn't it be fun to actually be able to go to one of these podcast conventions without being chained to a booth, so that I could actually see what it's like to go to a podcast convention?
Right.
Well, if we're there, Roger, you can just hey, I really want to go see this person. Hey, Chris, Jim, you guys cover the booth. I'm going, and we'd be happy to do that. You may be missing a ribbon microphone when you get back, but we'd be happy to. I'm kidding, man.
Well, it was a real pleasure, an honor to be on your show too. You've done great with this show, and I love what you're doing. I definitely want to support, and thank you guys for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
That was awesome.
Thank you so much, Roger. And for everybody who joined us, Ben and Phil and Gina, Matthew, what's up? Sorry we didn't get to everyone's questions. We were too busy nerding out with the audio legend Rodger Cloud. So make sure you go to cloudmicrophones.com, sign up for the newsletter, check out a Cloudlifter, and as always, don't fear the gear.
Thanks for having me on, guys. This is awesome. I love gear, love talking all about it. So yeah, this is going to be really fun.
I'm so excited. You guys are, everybody, please share this out. Hit that like button. Follow these guys.